They came from the sky, crashing down in the desert in an aircraft not from this world, according to UFO researchers.
I have heard rumors about it, yes.
A familiar story for those living here.
I've had 2 sightings myself of UFO craft.
Because I want to go with them.
Others think it's just that, a story.
I'm not a believer.
But self-proclaimed experts and researchers on the matter say what makes this crash so different is all the research, witness testimony, and even evidence surrounding it.
The Kingman crash is definitely in the top 5.
Author Preston Dennett is one of those researchers.
There's just a very small handful of UFO crash retrieval reports in the United States that have that kind of verification to them.
So we decided to find that information ourselves. Going to the Mojave Museum of History in Kingman, combing through old newspaper clippings, sketches, and even redacted government documents allegedly detailing the crash from those who were there, including Fritz Werner.
We now know him to be Arthur Stansel.
The documents claim Stansel was an Air Force engineer who studied the impact nuclear blasts had on homes and buildings. He was one of 40 people transported to the crash scene in a bus with blacked out windows so they wouldn't know where they were. They were told this was part of a secret project. When they arrived, the report claims the UFO, measuring 14 feet high and 30 feet in diameter, was made out of unfamiliar metal, plunged about 20 inches into the ground.
And it was his job to basically determine the speed of this object as it came down based upon the gouge it made in the soil. And he estimated it was about 1,200 miles per hour. The craft itself was largely undamaged.
Next to the UFO, the corpse of the so-called pilot, who was described as being about 4 feet tall and wearing a silver metallic suit. Surrounded by military police, the workers conducted their studies in the dead of night. It doesn't say how long they were there, but when they got back on the bus, an Air Force colonel who was in charge of the operation made them take an oath to keep this a secret. 20 years later, Stansel came forward, signing this affidavit, allegedly confirming what he saw. Then 50 years later, another secret about the crash was released by former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, Christopher Mellon, between him and a senior United States government member whose name has been redacted, claiming people would be slack-jawed if word got out about what they know, writing the U.S. government seized the Kingman UFO.
These craft are scooped up, taken to various Air Force bases, scientific labs, and studied intently to figure out exactly what we can figure out about how they work.
Despite the reports and witness accounts, we will never truly know if what happened in Kingman that day is true or not.
I don't think our governments are ever going to willingly disclose, really at all.
Dennett believes with more people and former government workers releasing classified information, we are getting closer to answers.
It's certainly movement.
It's certainly movement. Great line there. Yeah, well, great job on the show. It's a nice little piece put together, about the crash. I think it gets people just more, if they want to dive in further, right? They know what to look into if they want, which is what I did. And listening to a podcast you did with Richard Dolan, which was phenomenal, the whole thing. But one part of it, you talked about Kingman in there. So, I mean, I guess, first of all, just how do you feel that news segment went? Like when you saw that, you were happy with?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
I'm always a little bit nervous when I do interviews for particularly TV, because I have been edited to say pretty much the opposite of what I was trying to say. Some of these shows don't have a good reputation. So I was a little bit nervous about it. I mean, once I was on a news program showing a UFO landing site, and they said, "Are these landing traces pointing at gopher holes?" I'm like, "Well, no, those are gopher holes." And they said, "Well, would you point at it and say it's a landing trace?" I said, "Well, no, I'm not going to do that." And they tried to trick me. Said, "Put your fist in there, and we want to get a picture of you putting your finger in there." I'm like, "No, I'd already learned the hard way that they can be a little ruthless." So, so I was really surprised to see that this was a very serious news report. They didn't chop me up or edit me. Of course, they interview for you for a while. and use only short clips, which I understand. It's TV.
Yeah.
But yeah, they did a good report. It was serious. They got some new information. I think it's a legitimate case that deserves more attention. And I was very happy with how they put it forth in a serious way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be honest, like I tried to search like there's stuff out there, but there's not as much as you would think out there about this case, but it is fascinating when you think about it. So look, if you don't mind, could you just give us like the basic story here, right? Like for someone who doesn't know anything about, this story at all, or maybe not even UFOs, like what would you tell them about this story?
Yeah, well, there are some contradictions between the various testimonies, but a basic outline is what we know, that on May 21st, 1953, this craft apparently came down not too hard because it was largely intact, just outside of Paradise Valley, Kingman, Arizona. It goes by either of those names, the Paradise Valley crash or the Kingman UFO crash.
Oh, okay.
And there are several independent reports of this that have come through, throughout the years of this. We're building up a more complete story. But apparently it was, 30-foot craft, your standard flying saucer, silver metallic, left a gouge in the earth there. A group of scientists was sent out to study various aspects of it. Of course, Fritz Werner, aka Arthur G. Stansel, his job was to study the gouge in the earth and determine how quickly this craft came down, from what height, what speed, and so forth. But others were there to perhaps photograph it from the inside or the outside, or everyone had their scientific discipline. Everyone was brought out there in a bus with blacked out windows and told not to talk to each other and just to perform their various duties, which they did, and then had to sign a secrecy agreement, and off they went. And most of them, of course, didn't talk about it because there were 40 people, I believe, 40 men. I don't believe there were any women on that bus from the eyewitness testimony, who basically have kept quiet up to this day, because we've only got a couple of testimonies, or really it's just Arthur Stansel in terms of whoever was on that bus. But we've got some secondhand reports coming in from various people. I mean, the first break in the case actually came from Richard Hall. He's a very well-known researcher for the National Investigative Committee of Aerial Phenomena, NICAP, who was giving a lecture, and he said that he had someone approach him. Let me see, this was in 1964. A gentleman who was soon to be a commander in the Army said that in 1953, a UFO did crash in Arizona. 4 bodies were recovered. He said it was 30 feet in diameter, undamaged. All the details are matching up. And Richard Hall said he could not imagine a less likely hoaxer. Direct quote. So that was the first we ever really heard of it. But Raymond Fowler,
that's interesting,
really broke the case.
So that's when that first story of the 1953 case sort of was in the public realm, was that moment. Yeah, 1964, he said.
Yeah, it was trickling in little bits.
Or little bits, yeah, for sure. Okay.
But Arthur Stansel, I think he's a good witness. He's got an unimpeachable resume. Ray Fowler is a very thorough, very objective researcher. There's a lot of researchers out there who I'm going to put in quotes as researchers.
Yeah.
Because they're cherry picking, they're shoe fitting, they're pushing a narrative, they're debunkers, perhaps.
Sure.
Or just there to make a buck. Not Ray Fowler. Yeah. He's a good guy. I trust him. His research has stood up. He's never, gotten any complaints about his research. And he found this guy. He was approached and did not want his name used. Went by the pseudonym Fritz Werner. Of course, like I said, we now know him to be Arthur G. Stansel. He signed an affidavit. You saw it on the news program there.
Yeah.
He described this in great detail. He was apparently working under another relatively famous figure in this field, Dr. Eric Henry Wang, who was the head of the Department of Special Studies, and apparently was one of the guys in the know. But the reason Stansel got involved with this is that he was an engineer manager at the Air Material Command at Wright-Patterson. So if you know anything about this field, Wright-Patterson, Ohio, is the clearinghouse for foreign technology. So if a Russian plane crashes, that's where it's going to go. If a UFO crashes, it's going to go there, or at least part of it. And there's been a lot of research into Wright-Pat, and it's tremendous. So he was already connected to all of this, and that's what got him to this site, because I believe he was actually in Arizona at the time. So it was convenient to just ship out.
Have him there. Yeah. That is kind of an interesting thought. Like these 40 scientists on this bus, they were all local there, or they flew them all in from different parts, I guess.
Yeah, we don't know for sure, but probably it was, time is of the essence in these kinds of cases. So they bring people in who are there and ready to go. But I said this was a classic saucer. Actually, no, it wasn't. According to Stansel, it was more of a teardrop, sort of almost like a streamlined cigar, he said. But he said that there were little...
Streamlined cigar. Okay. I see what you mean.
I think kind of... I don't know. People always have a little bit of a difficult time trying to describe something that they've...
Like a gum wrapper? Not, you know what I mean? Like but without the ends?
I would like to talk to Stansel.
I don't. Yeah. Wow. What was the year that he came out with his pseudonym? I saw this interview he did where he's in the shadow of this doorway, and is that the first interview?
I don't know what year that was, but it would have to have been probably 70s.
70. I think the affidavit, I don't know why I remember 73 on it, but I could be wrong. I don't know. All right. Well, I'll put it in the final edit, so we'll look really smart when that comes out, like we do, right then and there, that date.
He was told not to look around though, but he did. He got a little nosy and said that he did glance inside this craft and did see a dead body, 4 feet tall, in a metallic suit. The ET seemed to love wearing these tight-fitting jumpsuits. And that's what he saw.
True.
Dark brown skin, apparently burned.
Just one, right?
One body? He saw one, yeah. So,
I'm sorry, you said skin burned or what?
Yeah. Well, he said it was dark brown, so apparently burned. Hard to say for sure. It's not the pale skin that we often hear with grays. Didn't have a whole lot of detail to it. But it's certainly, I think, an important testimony, given that he clearly wasn't seeking attention or money, of course, but felt it was important enough to get the story out. I think that's the motivation for most of these whistleblowers, because they're coming forward at great personal risk sometimes.
Sure, especially at that time to come forward with the story, So he sees the craft, or they all see the craft. But he takes a peek inside, sees this body, and like, what else? Is there anything else that happened at the site or something? Like, what did he's like walking around with a clipboard, like, or?
Yeah, as far as we know, he was just taken to the site, got to see the gouge that it made. He made measurements. Tested the soil.
He took measurements, tested. So so he was actively there for some time. Got it.
Oh yeah, and then he was marched back into the tent where everyone was kept until it was time for them to come out and do what they had to do. But he said that this. I have a direct quote here. I think he said that this object. Let me see. I have it right here. It was an unfamiliar metal which resembled brushed aluminum, he said. And also that this was definitely not anything from Earth. He was absolutely convinced of that. As he says, the object was not built by anything obviously that we know about on Earth. So
I mean,
you
I
know,
think once he saw the alien, that was pretty convincing at that point, right? Like the UFO doesn't even matter at that point. You see the body,
dead giveaway.
a dead giveaway. Yeah, it's a dead giveaway. No, that's interesting because I remember in the interview that I saw of him, where he first came out, right? He's in the shadows. He said like he did think at first, oh, this is just our own advanced tech. But as he was there longer and clearly saw more things and learned more things, he came to the conclusion you just said. And
Remember,
no one else. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Well,
yeah, he's a scientist. He's not just some guy off the street.
yeah,
He's someone who
absolutely.
knows about aeronautics and
Sure.
engineering. So
yeah, and brought out for a reason, right? A specific reason, to this. Were there any other people on the bus that have come forward, or he is the only one?
As far as I know, he's the only one. Not to say that there isn't more information, because researcher Leonard Stringfield, who's very well known for crash retrievals, did apparently talk to a witness who provided the same description. So this may have been another guy on the bus. Leonard Stringfield is another really well-respected researcher, very thorough, got drawn into the whole UFO crash retrieval subject pretty early on, and became sort of the go-to guy for crash retrieval reports. And his witness was there to analyze the metal and spent 2 days at the site.
Oh, wow. And
after doing all his tests, he concluded that this was not anything constructed on Earth. So that was, I think he talked to another witness as well.
So they kept this UFO in the ground for more than 2 days, apparently, right? If they're all at this site. Oh, that's so fascinating that they didn't. I guess this is new, these sort of crash retrievals at this point, right? Roswell had just happened less than a decade before that. Who knows? Before, there's the New Mexico
the
crash sites too. Yeah, Aztec and the I don't know if that's the same one like Diana Pasolka went to with Gary Nolan. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that particular crash site that they've gone to or not.
There's been quite a few more, I think, than most people realize, because they were dropping down pretty fast.
That's interesting.
What Cape Girardeau.
That for sure. What is the story that, or what potentially is a theory that what brought down this UFO in Kingman?
There are no reports on what actually brought it down. There was one guy who, I'm not so sure about this report. I believe, gosh, I'd have to look that one up, who said that it was gifted in essence.
I've heard that before. Donated.
I specialize most of my research on contactees and people who've had direct interactions with ETs, alleged ETs. I think they are ETs. I'll just say it. I think that's what we are dealing with here.
Sure.
But some have asked about this, and no, ETs do not give their technology to us, especially considering, we've got a long history of abusing technology and using it for warfare and so forth. So I don't know the reporting on, gifted UFOs is very credible. It's an interesting idea, but no, I'm on the other side of the fence with that one.
Given Arthur Stansel, right? Am I saying his name right?
Yeah, Arthur G. Stansel. Yep.
Arthur G. Stansel. Given his speciality and the reason he was actually brought out in that bus, isn't it fair to say maybe it had something to do with a nuclear? I keep saying that word wrong. I'm trying to say it right for everybody because I get in the comments all the time. I can't say nuclear, right? Nuclear. Oh my God. Nuclear. I don't know. I don't even want to say the word anymore, man. I get so much hate in the comments for that. But regardless, wasn't there a blast that went off potentially nearby that could have caused some, I don't know, right? Or why bring him out?
That. I would have to look that up. Because I dug deep, finding whatever information I could find. And like you said, there's not a whole lot. But with the vast majority of crash retrieval reports, it's maybe a single witness. And let's face it, it's pretty much all anecdotal. So for there to be anything that's documented in any way, or to have multiple witnesses of any kind, is a step up from the vast majority of these cases. Roswell is an outlier in that you've got hundreds of witnesses. I mean, it's absolutely undeniable. They've tracked that case from the people who saw it coming down, people who saw it on radar, people who guarded it, people who transported the wreckage. I mean, they've got this down. It's unbelievably well documented.
Yeah.
That one rises well and above the rest.
Sure.
But this one is right there in line, like I said on the news report.
Very interesting.
Just a handful of cases that have multiple corroboration. And certainly this Kingman case is one of them.